Uh, Very good morning to everyone. We have with us our Honorable Director, Professor Randeep Guleria, uh, with Dr. Amlesh Seth, Head of the Department of Urology, and Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Associate Dean Academics. I welcome you all to the fifth Dr. Sarinder Singh Memorial Oration, one of the prestigious oration organized by Department of Urology, AIIMS, New Delhi. And today we have with us Professor Gopal Badlani as the orator, who is Vice Chair, Clinical Affairs, Urology at Wake Forest University of Health Sciences, Winston, USA. Uh, may I request Professor Amlesh Seth to please introduce the oration and the orator, please.
Thank you, Sanjeev. Dignitaries on the dais, Professor Randeep Guleria, Director AIIMS, Professor Rajiv Kumar, Associate Dean, Dr. Sanjeev Lalwani, Registrar, ladies and gentlemen, and people who have joined online. Because of the COVID time, the oration is being held in a hybrid fashion. Only a few people have been invited to this boardroom, and most people are joining online through a YouTube link. So I welcome everybody to this prestigious oration. And as per the protocol, I'll briefly talk about Professor Sarinder Mansingh, and then later on I'll introduce the present orator, and then the oration would be held. So, Dr. Sarinder Mansingh Memorial Oration was instituted by the family of Professor Sarinder Mansingh. They requested AIIMS to start an oration in his name, and AIIMS accepted that oration. Dr. Sarinder Mansingh was born in 1928 at Moody in the pre-partition India. He had his schooling at Doon School in Dehradun. In the year 1945, he was selected for the MBBS course in King Edward Medical College at Lahore. But we all know that in the year 1947, after the partition, all the students of King Edward Medical College who wanted to migrate to India, they were placed in various medical schools in India. Professor Sarinder Mansingh got a placement in Stanley Medical College, Chennai, which was called as Madras at that time, from where he graduated as the best student. He bagged 4 gold medals and 7 other prizes. In October 1952, he proceeded to England and completed his FRCS in 1954. In 1955, he returned to India and joined the Irvine Hospital, which is now called as Loknayak Jayaprakash Hospital, attached to Maulana Azad Medical College. Initially, he was a registrar, and then later on, he was selected as a junior honorary consultant. In 1958, he joined as an assistant professor in the Department of Surgery at All India Institute of Medical Sciences, and that started another phase in his brilliant academic career. In a pioneering effort, he started the urology clinic at AIIMS. Then later on, he got the Rockefeller Foundation Fellowship in 1961, which enabled him to train at the famous Johns Hopkins Institution in USA, and then later on at Newcastle upon Tyne in UK. He returned in 1963 and joined as an associate professor and initiated the Department of Urology at AIIMS. In 1965, Professor Sarinder Mansingh was invited as inspector by Madras University to start the first MCH course in India. And that saw the beginning of the MCH urology training programs in India in the year 1966. In 1965. In 1966, the following year, MCH course was started at AIIMS. And during his headship, he trained more than 70 postgraduates in urology who are now occupying very prestigious chairs all over India and all over the world. In August 1969, Dr. Singh was appointed as professor and head. In 1974, he was awarded the Senior Commonwealth Fellowship for 3 months. He was one of the pioneers of urology in India and made an impact as a teacher, clinical researcher, and a progressive urologist. He was elected as president of Urological Society of India in 1976. During his long innings at AIIMS, he made immense contribution to the growth and practice of urology in India. Besides the general urology and transurethral resection, he developed special interest in carcinoma of the urinary bladder. He started a bladder tumor registry. He standardized the diagnosis and surgical management of pheochromocytoma and built up the largest series in India during his tenure. Dr. Sarinder Singh was an examiner to all the universities for MCH urology as well as DNB. He published more than 70 papers and participated in all major urological meetings including BAUS, AUA and SIU. He was the first member of SIU from India and was on the editorial committee of British Journal of Urology. He started Delhi Urology Society as an academic forum, which now has become a very, very vibrant body. He was known as a thorough gentleman, kind-hearted, and always ready to help patients and postgraduate students. In spite of his personal tragedy of losing his wife in 1992, he never showed his anguish and remained always smiling and hardworking. He left for his heavenly abode on 8th October 2006 after a brief illness for which he underwent a surgery in July 2006. He has left behind a legacy that is difficult to match, and he will ever be remembered for his contributions in the field of urology in India. AIIMS invites an orator to deliver an oration on the subject of his choice. In the past, the orators have been Professor S.K. Sharma, the ex-head of the department and ex-director of PGI Chandigarh, Professor N.P. Gupta, ex-head of the Department of Urology at AIIMS, Professor Mahendra Bhandari, ex-HOD of Urology and ex-director of AGPGI Lucknow, and Professor Hemal, ex-professor of Urology at AIIMS and now in USA. Professor Pramod Sogani was nominated for the Oration last year, but because of multiple reasons, that Oration could not be held. Now, I will briefly introduce Professor Gopal Badlani, the orator for today. Professor Gopal Badlani did his MBBS from Bombay University at the Topiwala National Medical College in 1972. He did his MS in surgery from Nair Hospital in 1975, again in Mumbai. He worked as a clinical assistant in Queen's Mary Hospital in 1975. He did his surgical training. He joined his surgical training at Long Island Jewish Medical Center in 1976 and at St. Agnes Hospital in 1977. He completed his urology training at Long Island Jewish Medical Center in 1980. He did a fellowship from the Baylor University Medical Center in Urodynamics in 1983. He is a board certified urologist from the American Board of Urology and also a board certified specialist in female pelvic medicine and reconstructive surgery. He is a member of the American Urology Association, American College of Surgeons, National Kidney Foundation, and Society of International Urologists. Presently, he is Section Chief of Urology and Professor of Urology at Wake Forest Institute for Regenerative Medicine. He is also a Professor of Obstetrics and Gynecology in Wake Forest Institute. And if I begin talking about his awards and his publications, there will be no time remaining for his oration. So therefore, I think I should stop here and invite Professor Gopal Badlani for his oration. Thank you.
It is such an honor to deliver this prestigious oration. My gratitude to Dr. Seth, my pranam to all the esteemed guests. It would have been so sweet to have the lovely food in Delhi. I hope in 2021 we can meet again. In discussing the topic for this oration, Dr. Seth asked me to talk about my journey. And in my view, the path to reach the pinnacle of success is paved by others who allowed me to reach there. There are a number of individuals who've been part of my journey. My nurturing, my birth in India has a big role. The influence of India has remained entirely through my life. The nurturing by my parents, Laj and Hari Badlani, are immeasurable. They made me who I am. My life partner, those who paved the way, the person who changed my life perspective, and what I can reflect on in the back. Charu has left me with indelible mark right through my life. She has maintained me grounded in reality in life. She being a physician, we studied together and have been married now for 46 years. And she's been a great partner in terms of my life and my success. Starting my urology career, I owe a lot to the people who inspired me to take urology as a life's choice. And that was principally Dr. Shobha Lal, Dr. Sunavala, and Dr. Casey Mehta at Nair Hospital, who influenced my early learning in surgery before I moved to the US. We got married in London, and then I started my career in US. The start was in Long Island Jewish in New York, where I went through a surgical career and through urology training. I was lucky enough to find a spot for urology in New York, happened after somebody's dropped out. But the real training happened after Dr. Smith's arrival at Long Island Jewish in 1982. This was after the completion of my training. He started me on an academic path. I did my fellowship training at Baylor with Dr. Keith Light and Dr. Brantley Scott, the famous Scott who invented the implants, the inflatable penile prosthesis and the sphincter. It was great learning. I came back and joined Dr. Smith. Although I was trained in neurourology and urodynamics, which was my career, endourology took over the first phase of my life at Long Island Jewish. The start of the Endourology Society and the whole decade went by in the world of endourology, which has remained part of my life. It took more than a decade to come back to neurourology. In part of that journey is when I first came with Dr. Smith in 1986. We did our initial courses in Bombay Hospital and Jaipur with Dr. Gangwal. However, during that visit, we spent a day at the All India Institute. That was my first meeting with Professor Singh and many of the individuals at that time have become life partners in many different ways. Principally, Dr. Ashok Himmel, who's my current partner at Wake Forest, Indy Gill, who's large part of our group together and work here, and Rajiv, who became a partner in SIU in many of the educational courses, etc. Of course, Professor Wadhwa, Dr. N.P. Gupta, and Dr. Seth have been leaders in education programs which have participated in India and have been a great help in developing that aspect of the career. Faith, destiny, or whatever you might call, brought me in touch with a great saint in 1992. It brought about awakening of my life, showed me a path which is unique and different for my academic career. And what he shared with me is unique, that in giving, you receive more. And taking care of the young, the old, and the people who cannot afford is the way of life, the karma. We have journeyed that with a group in Jeevat Seva Sansthan in Baragar near Bhopal, and caring for these patients with teams that come with me and some local colleagues such as Darshan and others who have been there, have been a great journey in terms of learning from there. Part of this journey has also taken me to Africa, where the fistula women not only improved my surgical skills, but it showed me how lucky we are in where we are born and how we grow up. Essentially, these women suffered such a great deal. And this is a picture of Niger. Niamey is the capital city. And going there was just really affects your life in a great way to see the suffering of these women. And many of you have done the same, but for me, this was a great, great influence. Somewhere around 2006, Dr. Atala convinced me to move from New York to North Carolina. It was a desire to do more in basic science. Dr. Atala, as you know, is a world leader in regenerative therapy, and although initially very hesitant to come down to a small town, Winston-Salem, which is in North Carolina, I moved there in 2006, and it really has been a great, great journey with good partners. This is our institute where I welcome you all, and the town of Winston-Salem in the background, the towers in the building. This is our clinic, and it's the Regenerative Institute and the research that has brought about a great joy. So it started off with creating a monkey model. And you can see this was published in 2008. I moved here in 2006. It took about 2 years. We were lucky to work with a public health unit that was sacrificing some primates that were on treatment for hormonal therapy, and we were able to establish a model. We studied the anatomy, studied the physiology, showing how close the primate anatomy was to the human anatomy in terms of the proximal distal urethra. And then we were able to study this physiologically. Dr. Carl Eric Anderson, the famous pharmacology chief, was here at that point, and he helped me create this model where we're able to study this with the micro CT. The WFOAM is a fantastic institute where you have all these teams available for imaging, for pharmacology, for studies, to be able to work as a team. And then once we were able to study this, we did the urodynamic studies at different age groups of monkeys to establish young versus old in terms of looking at urethral profile. So it took almost 10 years to establish the model, to study the model, to optimize a incontinent model by creating a injury model to the monkey, to be able to replicate this, and then to be able to get a grant to study the effect of different conditions that happened. Urodynamic profile, pre and post denervation was studied. And then, of course, pre and post, we were able to study the damage to the urethra and histologically study that as well. We even did some sling procedures on these monkeys to be able to study them for the incontinence purposes. I came across another partner in the genetic world, which allowed us to study my initial research in the defect that is present in the collagen make and remodeling in the female population in stress incontinence. And that allowed us to study the gene profile of women with stress incontinence and prolapse, looking at MMP1, which was based on chromosome 11. We're able to identify an extra allele which cause the enhancement of MMP1, which resulted in increased breakdown of collagen and elastase. We then were able to show the frequency of this GG allele in the patient population being much, much higher than in general population, showing that the genetic reason for this MMP1 gene to be active and then be able to produce this. So before I move on to the other aspect of my life, I just want you to not walk away with the feeling that life has been roses. There are lots of valleys between the mountains of success. And these valleys can be quite, can get you down quite a bit because so many of the trials that you participate in and the experiments that you do not come to fruition, do not come to success. In fact, in my philosophical phase, I wrote about the success is based on foundation of a significant number of failures. It's only the failures that bring you forward. So I look through my publications, and there are so many that never saw clinical light. We studied the experiment, but it never became clinically relevant. So that is part of life. You will see more failures than successes in terms of what you're known for, etc. But in general, I would say that the longevity, just take this regenerative therapy model. You saw the publication in 2001 was the first publication that we came out with cell therapy. We are in 2021, 20 years down the line, it's still not reality. So the longevity of effort requires some support, and that's why your institution, your research support like we've had from NIDDK and NIH comes useful. Otherwise, you cannot sustain it to present your work over a long period of time. I think there are more than 100 residents, fellows, co-investigators who've been part of my life, have enriched my life to bring about the success. The other aspect of life has been working with a variety of societies and achieving some leadership role in the societies, which have made it possible to have so many friends around the world. So I started locally in New York with a very small organization, Brooklyn, Queens, Long Island Association. then worked with New York Academy of Medicine, which works with a lot of the resident programs. Regionally, then became a leader for the New York section of the AUA. Later on, nationally, it was the female organization, the SUFU, as well as the AUA. Most people accuse me that I bleed AUA, and that's because my great time with the AUA in becoming the secretary that allowed me to develop the bond with countries like India, Brazil, China, Japan, and so many other countries to build the international education. That was a great part of my life. Currently, the Urological Care Foundation allows me to do the humanitarian aspect, which is what I love the most. And the Urology Care Foundation is also a patient education material. We've been lucky to have support to translate this material in Hindi, in Punjabi, and in Arabic languages. So this material is available to you through the AUA website or the urologyhealth.org. I also had the wonderful opportunity of being on the NIDDK leadership team, being there on the 4 years on the council to be able to review grants, and that was a wonderful experience. Internationally, of course, Endourology Society has been a big part of life for the last 30 plus years. And then I had the opportunity to, with Rajiv, to run the programs at SIU, which was a great opportunity. But in essence, what you realize is that you're going to be remembered for what you do. What message can I leave you? I think we all start with serving self first. It appears to be the guiding principle for most. In all aspects of our life, the transformation to serve the purpose without considering me takes a conscious effort after a higher learning, in my view, which came to me very fortunately in '92. I can tell you it's a refreshing release when an action is taken without an expectation of return or a goal of self-enhancement. We are able to do this somewhat in our personal life, perhaps just with our children and spouse. Even there is a partial, as the emotional return is the expectation there. But once we step out of the house, we rarely are able to do something at work or while serving an organization without consideration of me as the first. These actions are subtle most of the time. I think they're without an overt desire to do so. Other times is blatant or in your face. It may be the norm in political or business dealing, but it is also very prevalent in organized medicine. There is no formal teaching of this process. And I guess it evolved from self-preservation instinct. However, it appears to be present in every stage of life, even after significant achievement and glory. How to and when does this want stop and giving begin? Giving is not money, but doing the right thing, in my view, or action taken after self out of the equation. It is hard and needs a life coach. When it happens, I think the inner happiness and quotient improves along with consciousness. You collect a different set of wealth with which you carry yourself to the end. So I know I get very philosophical, but I will revert to some Hindi, and I hope you'll indulge me. This is something that I wrote, and I'll read. जिंदगी आधी से ज्यादा बीत चुकी है, पीछे घूमकर देखूं तो सवाल उठता है, कुछ बदल सकूं तो क्या बदलूं? सवाल तो सीधा सा था, पर जवाब सोचते कई दिन निकल गए। अगर ये होता तो वो ना होता। दिल और दिमाग की कश्मकश में बहुत उलझ सा गया। आखिर ये अंदर से आवाज आई, खुदा ने जो लिखी कहानी लाजवाब रही है। ऊपर वाले का शुक्र मानते हुए ये मिन्नत करता हूं, बाकी की कहानी ऐसी ही रही तो इस दुनिया को जन्नत मानकर खुशी से चला जाऊंगा। Thank you very much for listening to me. I greatly appreciate this honor.
Thank you, sir. Since Professor Gopal Badlani is live connected with us, may I request him to please address the gathering, please.
Thank you. It's such an honor to see friends and colleagues and to be honored in such an esteemed group. I spoke from the heart. I hope, I hope I was able to convey my thoughts to you. I deeply appreciate this honor. Thank you very much.
May I request our Honorable Director to say please few words.
Good morning, Professor Gopal Badlani, the orator for today, and the Vice Chair, Clinical Affairs, Urology, Wake Forest University Health Sciences, USA, Professor Amlesh Seth, Head of the Department of Urology, Dr. Rajiv Kumar, Associate Dean, Dr. Sanjeev Lalwani, my faculty colleagues, residents, ladies and gentlemen who are present physically and virtually. First of all, I'd like to take this opportunity to really thank Dr. Gopal Badlani for accepting our oration, Dr. Sarinder Mansingh oration. I've known Dr. Sarinder Mansingh as a child, and I know his son Ajit Mansingh very well because he's an ENT surgeon practicing in Delhi and an avid swimmer. He used to spend a lot of time in the AIIMS campus swimming pool. Thank you very much for your philosophical talk. I think it was something which is very pertinent, especially to all of us and the younger generation. As you rightly said, life is all about what you give rather than what you take from for yourself. And a lot depends, especially for us who are in medicine, that we must have that empathy and the desire to really help our patients as much as we can without really wondering of what we get in return. And in my own feeling, what I think is that what we get in terms of the satisfaction that we have and the smile that we see on the patients that we heal is much more valuable than any materialistic return that we would ever get. I think life is all about giving, and that is what you very rightly said. So thank you very much for the oration, and I think it will be something that we will remember for a long time. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. May I request our Honorable Director to present the award to Professor Badlani. May I request Dr. Amlesh Seth to please accompany and Dr. Rajiv Kumar also, please. Prof.
It's an honor to receive these on behalf of Professor Gopal Badlani, and they will be with us in safe custody. And when we meet him personally, we will hand over both the plaque as well as the certificate. Professor Badlani has decided to donate the honorarium for the Student Welfare Association, for the Student Welfare Fund, and we thank Professor Badlani for that. Thank you very much.
Now I invite Professor Rajiv Kumar, Associate Dean Academic, to deliver vote of thanks.
Good morning. Professor Badlani, the orator for today, Professor Guleria, Director, AIIMS, Professor Amlesh Seth, Head of the Department of Urology at AIIMS, Dr. Sanjeev Lalwani, the Registrar, members of the faculty, students, staff, and people attending this oration online. It's my proud privilege to recognize the contribution both of Dr. Badlani for the oration and in general to urology, not just around the world, but very specifically to India and to the developing nations. Dr. Badlani has actually lived most of what he has taught today. And most of us who work in urology are aware of his immense contributions, philanthropic contributions to developing world. He comes every year, in fact, multiple times every year, to run charitable camps in parts of India, primarily around Bhopal and also around Gujarat. He brings his own team of people. He takes local physicians' help. And there are hundreds of patients who benefit from this philanthropic work that he's been doing for years. He does that not just in India, which may be an area of interest for him because of his birth here, but he also does the same thing across Africa, and he does the same thing at various places around the world. And not only does he do that, he encourages others to do the same thing and recognizes them for their contribution. So this is unique. To be able to live what you preach is not common, and therefore we thank Dr. Badlani for accepting our oration and for having delivered this life lesson to most of us today. I must also take this opportunity to thank the All India Institute of Medical Sciences, New Delhi, and Professor Guleria, the director, for being here today. The presence of the director at the oration invariably brings a lot of gravitas to the occasion, and the institution for allowing us to have this oration every year and recognize the contribution of urologists in the memory of Professor Sarinder Singh, who founded urology not just at this institution, but at numerous places in this country by training residents, helping programs being set up, and a thorough gentleman to the core. I mean, I can only remember an anecdote. I joined urology, I in fact joined this institution after he had superannuated. But when I joined the faculty, Dr. Mansingh had already superannuated probably about 20 years earlier, or maybe about 15 years earlier. But he invited my wife and me to tea at his club. And we'd been told that Dr. Mansingh would be there on the dot, and if you're 5 minutes late, you'll probably not find him there. So we made sure we were there on time. Extremely generous, extremely charitable. He spent a good half an hour, 45 minutes with us for tea, and just because I joined as faculty. A thorough gentleman to the core. It's a privilege to be working in a department that has had such stalwarts, and of course the institution that is recognized for it. Thank you also to all the attendees for this oration. The oration we expect will be available on the YouTube channel for the future and will be in the archives of this institution. Thank you once again for being here.